Good afternoon, or evening or morning, wherever you are, whatever time it is. Thank you for joining me today. We're talking about Chapter 3 today in American history, the American pageant. Um, before we go on, I'm just going to remind you guys how important it is that you complete these questions and get them in. This is a big part of your grade. There's going to be a lot of readings, etc., as well, and there's questions for those too. The questions that we have here, the textbook questions, I lecture on them. They also come directly out of the textbook. So a person can either read the exact textbook and answer the questions, or they can follow along the lecture and answer the questions. I highly recommend watching the lectures, obviously, this is to allow some flexibility in your style of learning. We're going to start with the northern colonies, and there's going to be this chapter is a rather long chapter, so I just want to make you aware of that right at the beginning. This is a chapter that's going to be a quite extensive lecture and a quite extensive discussion of the concepts, because the northern colonies and their values and the character traits they exhibited are what drove American success, and we're going to talk more about that. But I'm just going to make you aware that this is a rather long chapter. There's not quite as there's a good number of questions specifically on this chapter. But furthermore, it's a chapter that we really need to understand. Our chapter opens here, and again, I'm following along with the textbook and the exact and the exact teaching method here. Simply because it's easier for you to follow along. If we were in a classroom, we might do a little more. It'd be a little more entertaining, but here in our setting right now, this is where we're at. So, chapter 3 starts by talking about why did the northern colonies settle, and we'll go right to question number 1: is what principally caused the settlement? What principally shaped the early settlements? And that answer is very simply religious devotion. It was not the early Americans in the northern colonies were not after. The colonists were not after wealth, specifically. That may have came secondary or third. Okay, they were after religious devotion. The Puritans who established there were worried about their religious freedoms. I'm not even talking about the separatists here specifically. I'm talking about the Puritans in general. The Puritans who established it. They came out of religious devotion. Where does this all come out of? Well, it goes back to Martin Luther, the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther nailed his protests, or his 95 Theses, I believe, against the door of Wittenberg's Cathedral in 1517. 1517 is the year that changed the world history. He announced that he was shaping, he didn't know that he was shaping the destiny of a yet unknown country. Luther is a complex person. One of the things about Luther is we go back and we read some of his stuff today, and he had some stuff that, well, to be real honest, it wasn't very nice. He said some things about various groups of people that in his time may have been believed, but today we look at that and wonder how a person can say that and be religious. He held some theological positions that are different. Some stuff that we would highly disagree with. But one very important thing that must be recognized here when it comes to Luther is his focus. Luther declared that the Bible alone was the source of God's Word. Johann Tetzel. You're not going to find this in the textbook if you're looking to follow along with the story. Johann Tetzel. Trying to raise money for St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Johann Tetzel was hired by the Catholic Church to go and raise funds. And the way he did it was through selling a thing called indulgences. An indulgence was basically a buyout of purgatory. Purgatory was the place where, if you were a Catholic, you went to spend before you went to heaven. what had happened in the Catholic Church, and this is one of those things where I tell you, theology, religion, and beliefs and history are inescapably linked. The Catholic Church, in about 400, really became the established church. And so what happened is, it was the Christian church. But there was a great many people who were Catholic, or claimed to be a part of Christians, who did not exhibit the behavior and morality of Christians. And obviously, a theologian can look and say, okay, these people, this person, they're lying, they're stealing, they're committing adultery. These things are directly forbidden in the Bible. Okay? How can they go to heaven? That they cannot go to heaven. Well, it says in the Bible about that they will suffer the fires, about fires and eternity. Okay? So the idea of purgatory was established. Okay, we know these people are baptized into the church. We know they claim they are Christians. We know they are part of the church. But they show immorality. Now, well, if a person couldn't control their immorality, how can they still must be able to go to heaven because they're part of the church, but they're showing immorality or unChristlikeness. Now, how does that? How do you reconcile that? So they established a concept. The concept of purgatory. They had your life here. After you died, you went to purgatory. Okay, on top of I'm putting my fist on top here. After you died, you went to purgatory. Now, if you were a very devout, holy individual, you might only be there a very short amount of time, depending on your life, on your works. Okay, you went to heaven if you were part of the Catholic Church. No matter if you follow their practices, their practices that they had set out, their sacraments, you went to heaven no matter what. Again, in their belief. But if you lived a very unholy life, you might be in purgatory for a very long time. To simplify, purgatory is basically sort of like hell, except it's not permanent. You burn in fires for a while, but after a while, you go to heaven, depending on how long. Okay, this idea sounds crazy, right? Or does it? Today in our world, we see Calvinists that are out there that they say they're saved and they're saved forever, but then they live extremely immoral lives. Okay, we see people claiming to be Christians of all types, holiness, non-holiness, Methodist, Presbyterian, of all religions, that clearly are not exhibiting a Christian life. Well, can a person be sin and go to heaven? No, they obviously cannot. But that I mean, and you can look in, if you like, for verses on that. You can look. There's a great number of them, but 1 John chapter 3 is a great one. You know, and I'm not going to go into that. A person just needs to do a cursory search of the Bible. Get on your Bible, get on your computer, look up King James Version about verses about sin. You can see that. Okay, but the concept here was, what do we do about people whose lives do not fit that? And this is a concept that is crept in. You'll see it over and over and over. We see it. We're going to see it here. We're going to see it again in with the Puritans. We're going to see it again a couple hundred years later with the Methodists. We're going to see it a couple hundred years later, or 150 years later, with the holiness people, and we're going to see it about 100 years later with the conservatives leaving the holiness, and then the relational holiness people that exhibiting a lifestyle that is not holy. All right, and beliefs, etc. Okay, so this is a reoccurring thing. The Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. This is one of those things where we're going to see the theology inescapably tied to history. And here, Luther establishes the idea that the Bible alone is the source of God's Word. He does that in reaction to Johann Tetzel. Johann Tetzel, by trying to raise money, went out and began to sell indulgences. Indulgences, as I mentioned, got you out of purgatory. So basically, here's how it works. Let's say I live a horrible life, cheat, steal, murder, okay, etc. And I die, okay? When I die, I leave behind some wealth, but I know I'm going to be rotten in purgatory for a long time because I was a pretty bad person. So I have my family members, or maybe I buy it beforehand, pay Johann Tetzel several $1,000s. And as a result of that, Johann Tetzel grants a person the right or the ability to get out of purgatory quickly. or immediately. Okay? Basically, you could buy your ability to buy your way out of suffering for your misdeeds in purgatory. That was the idea. The saying goes that every time the money clings, another soul is released from purgatory. Okay, Johann Tetzel went around telling this. I'm going to interrupt this boring part for an interesting story. And my kids when I was a teacher in the Cayman Islands, they enjoyed this story. So I'll share it with you, although it may be beneath your level. But Johann Tetzel is out. He's obviously selling these indulgences. It's selling. He's selling. You give me a bunch of money. It's forgiveness for sin. Well, what in those days, if you broke the law, but the priest forgave you, then the police couldn't arrest you. And the saying was, if God doesn't condemn you, then neither will we. Okay. So an individual goes to Johann Tetzel and says, Mr. Tetzel, I want to buy an indulgence. I'm going to commit a crime of theft. Mr. Tetzel says, all right, that's going to be X. He's like, well, it's going to be it's a rather bad crime because I'm going to rob a priest. And Johann Tetzel says, all right, that's going to be a very high amount. Let's see the amount. We'll make up an amount here. Let's say it's 100 pieces of silver. So the individual pays 100 pieces of silver. And he says, so what you're telling me then is I am forgiven from this sin. Johann Tetzel says, yes, you have paid and earned forgiveness for this sin. So, and now, remember, if you're forgiven by Johann Tetzel or the church, you're also forgiven by the police and the state. So the next day, Johann Tetzel is carrying his massive, chests of money in his wagon. And he's traveling through, and all of a sudden, a masked rider pulls up and says, with a sword and robs him. Give me all your money. And he takes all the money, and they're about to leave him. Johann Tetzel's like, by robbing God, you have suffered an immense punishment. Not only are you stealing from God and the church can be after you, but the police are going to be after you as well. The rider turns and pulls down his mask and says, Mr. Tetzel, I paid in advance. I've bought my indulgence. I am robbing the priest, but I paid already for this. The man paid for the indulgence, then went and paid for his penalty, paid his penalty for his sin, and then went and committed his sin, which involved robbing Johann Tetzel of all of the money he had collected, including his own. Now, I think this story is legend, but my understanding is there might be a little bit of truth actually to this story. Whether or not somebody came up with the idea or it actually happened, it shows the idea of Johann Tetzel. Martin Luther, in response to Johann Tetzel, said, the Bible alone is the source of God's word. And he believed that faith alone was how you achieve justification or salvation. And then this idea was in direct response theologically to the idea that you could buy your salvation. He said, you can't buy your salvation. You can't earn your salvation. You have to have it by works. Now, I'm going to mention here a man's name, Erasmus. Erasmus is often known as the man who was debated and pushing back on Luther. However, he also was known in the Catholic Church as they said, Erasmus laid the egg and Luther hatched it of the Protestant Reformation. Erasmus made a very important note to Luther and pushed back on something that's very important you should know. And at the time, most everyone recognized, or it was a debate, but it was recognized there was a problem here with Luther's theology. With Luther's theology, it was recognized very quickly by everyone, and especially Erasmus, by everyone, that if you only believed that salvation was by faith, and that there was no works component, no life component to it, then very rapidly the people and everyone become very immoral and live horrible lives. You could say, oh, I'm saved, and then go and live a horrible, terrible life. Erasmus made this point. It is for this reason that often when we look back theologically, to Luther. We also note that Erasmus's main point, that works don't have anything to do with salvation per se. And I'm not getting into that discussion. One could read James. In the book of James it says, show me your faith, and I'll show you my faith by my works. Faith without works is dead. And then those verses, I may be quoting exactly perfectly, but You can look it up in James for yourself to understand. But the idea is here that the Lutheran Church, within 50 years of Luther's idea, became a horribly immoral people. Okay? He established the idea of faith alone. But his major contribution was that you base your beliefs on the Bible. He based his belief on faith alone, on the Bible. This concept of the Bible alone as the authority of God's Word transformed Europe. You had groups establishing new ideas, new concepts, and fighting against the Catholic Church, who believed that the Bible was not the only inspiration of God's Word, that the church liturgy or the ecclesiastical structure, or especially the bishops, the cardinals, and the Pope himself could say, if the Pope said something, that came from God. Establishing the idea you can have a personal relationship with God via the Bible alone as a source of God's Word was Luther's major contribution. By the way, that is question number 2. What became the dominant theological credo of the Puritans? That is Calvinism. Now, Calvinism, established by John Calvin, is very different than today's Calvinism taught by Baptists. And I want to make that point very distinct here. You won't find, as holiness people, or as people theologically coming from the Wesleyan Arminian tradition, speaking very highly often of Calvinism. Calvinism, however, when we're taught in general, in context of right now in this history class, is not the neo-Calvinists today, where people live horribly immoral lives and say they're Christian because they were saved once. That's not what I'm talking about here. They did not believe once saved, always saved. Okay? They did not believe in the doctrine of eternal security like people do today. Instead, Calvinism argued that humans, that God was all-powerful and all-good, but humans, because of the corrupting effect of original sin, were weak and wicked. This concept of original sin is all theologians believed it in history, basically always, and except for one group which was Pelagians, which were denounced as heretics. That's just a point to remember. It is an actual heresy to believe that there was not an original sin within yourselves. And again, that's a theological concept that draws back to this, and I'm not going into that, but that is a historical belief. I'm not talking. I'm not sharing my. I'm not sharing my theological beliefs here. In this class, theology is intrinsically tied with history. Religion is intrinsically tied to history, but I'm sharing the historical beliefs, not mine. I'm mentioning that. I've mentioned that elsewhere, but I'm going to remind you here. These are not my beliefs. I'm trying to share the historical background and the historical beliefs, not my personal opinions. Whether or not I agree or disagree. Number 4, Calvin argued humans were weak and wicked. Why? Because of their corrupting effect of original sin. Calvin believed that there was an elect. Okay? The verse in the Bible about predestination is where he draws it from, but it's the concept that God, since the first moment of creation, some souls, the elect, were destined for eternal bliss and others for eternal torment. Good works could not save those whom predestination had marked for infernal fires. However, neither could the elect count on their predetermined salvation and lead lives of wild, immoral abandon. Let me say that one more time, because that is a very important point to know about in the context of the Puritans and how they lived and why it drove them to such immense success. Neither could the elect count on their predetermined salvation and lead lives of wild, immoral abandon. Okay? The Calvinists believed they constantly sought in themselves and others signs of conversion. Conversion was thought of as an intense, identifiable personal experience in which God revealed to them their heavenly destiny. That, by the way, is number 6. Question number 6. Number 5. Calvin did not believe that the elect could count on salvation and live how? I just mentioned that. I'll say it again. They could not lead lives of wild, immoral abandon. Calvinism, under John Calvin, stressed moral, holy lives. Let me say that again. Calvinism stressed moral, holy lives. People departing from that are departing from traditional Calvinistic views. Again, history, theology, tied together. Why was this important? Okay? These doctrines swept into England as Henry VIII broke with the Catholic Church. He broke with them because he wanted to have a divorce. Okay? He wanted to divorce the church, the Catholic Church. Sorry, he wanted to divorce his wife. The Catholic Church would not let him. Therefore, he decided he's going to establish a new church, the Church of England, for all the people of England, and that way he wasn't answerable to the Pope. He would be the head of it, and that way he could divorce his wife. Okay, as it happened when they established the Church of England, the Puritans, or people who wanted to purify the Catholic Church, and then subsequently the Church of England, they wanted a purification. They were frustrated by the immoral, unholy lives of the Catholic Church, and by some of those that in the Church of England. They believe in holy living. Puritans, purify. Okay? Puritans mean people who want to purify the church. These people believe so strongly in holy living, they literally fought wars against immoral and unholy living. Alright? The most devout Puritans, Puritans grew increasingly unhappy because the church was only changing very slowly, and it wasn't becoming holy as rapidly. They burnt, on the textbook here it says, they burned with pious zeal to see the Church of England wholly Catholicized. Okay? The most devout Puritans, then subsequently, because of the political nature and worried about that seeing the Catholic Church not being purified as rapidly as possible, believing in their religious theology so strongly, then left and settled in New England. They believed only the visible saints, that is, persons who felt the stirrings of grace in their soul and could demonstrate His presence to fellow Puritans, could be admitted to church membership. Okay, you will know that is one of the questions in here. Number 7, Puritans believed only who should be admitted to church membership, and how is this people expected to live? Now, I'm going to mention a few here, and I'll put it in the questions, but I'm going to tell you this right now. This is going to be on the test. Okay? Who were visible saints? And I'm going to want this pretty much to have an exact definition, I believe. Visible saints were persons who felt that the stirrings of grace in their souls, that it's persons who felt the stirrings of grace in their souls and could demonstrate His presence to their fellow Puritans. You could not claim salvation. You had to claim it and you had to demonstrate it. Let me say it again. You had to claim it, but you had to demonstrate it through a pure and holy life. That is the people they believed were the visible saints, and those were the only people they believed were worthy of holding church membership, and only church members could vote. They did not want people who were living unholy lives to have voting rights in their new colony. Let me say that again. They did not want people who they believed were living unholy lives to have voting rights in their new colony. Let me say that one more time. They did not want people who were living unholy lives to have voting rights in their new colony. It is a small wonder that the tiny little area of Puritans in New England were the engine that has driven our entire world to success. More on that later. But there's 2 tiny little places in the world. Tiny, East Anglia in England and in the Massachusetts Bay Colony area. Those 2 areas were the locomotive that has driven this entire world to its success. Why? Because they believe so strongly in holy lives. Unbelievable to me how intrinsically tied that our beliefs and our theology and our living is. I continue on here just slightly more, and then I'm going to end this video. Who was number 8? Who is John Winthrop, and what did he believe about a calling? John Winthrop. You know what? Let me stop right here and just end this video, and we'll continue on here in a second. But I just want to mention one more time, and go back to this. These Puritans, these people, they left England because they did not believe that the church was becoming holy enough. They were fighting for holy living. They tried to change the Church of England. It didn't feel like it was succeeding. They felt like there'd been 100 years, okay, roughly, maybe 90, 80, depending on the ages of someone, since the Church of England is separated from the Catholic Church, that it was not becoming what they believed a godly church was about. And they felt like they were scared for their own religious freedoms, their ability to purify the church. And they felt like it was bad influences, and they wanted to leave this church that they viewed as immoral and unholy and go to the New World and establish not a new church, a church of the same sort of denomination in a sense, but a church that was pure and holy and upright, and not just a church, a colony. And I'm going to go more on that in the next video, but I just wanted to reiterate that for this video. Thank you.